In King Hezekiah's 4th year, now that's all summary, okay? We're going to get into a stretch here where some of the chronological data is going to be very, very, very confusing. Some of it's going to be pretty precise, but still pretty confusing. Remember, chronology was not the most important thing to these people. Recording things straightforward in a line by the year they happened was not very important to the Hebrews. It became more important to the nations around them as time went on. The Assyrians did, for example, the Assyrians did keep year-by-year records. But that is just not that important to the Hebrews. It just isn't. So yeah, they do have some chronological markers in here. But even with that, we have to be very careful, because even that can be confusing. These last few sentences we just got done reading have been a summary of Hezekiah's entire reign. We're not talking about things here in chronological fashion from like year 1 to year 2 to year 3 and whatever. But here we are going to talk about things kind of in a step-by-step forward fashion. So let's read these next few verses. In King Hezekiah's 4th year, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. This is 725 BC. At the end of 3 years, the Assyrians took it. So Samaria was captured in Hezekiah's 6th year, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. That's 722 BC. So we're reckoning this now to Hezekiah's reign, but this is probably referring to his co-regency with his father Ahaz. The king of Assyria deported Israel to Assyria and settled them in Halah and Gozan on the Habor River and in towns of the Medes. This happened because they had not obeyed the Lord, their God, but had violated his covenant, all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. They neither listened to their commands nor carried them out. This was a summary statement of 2 Kings 17, which I admit right now I can't remember for certain if I've read that or not. I can't remember right now off the top of my head if I've read 2 Kings 17 in its entirety or not. Well, we'll go back and read that at some point. Right now we're focusing on Hezekiah. And that's to help set the context for Isaiah. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign. Now this is referring to his sole reign. This is 701 BC here. Okay? This is confusing. Okay? If you haven't been confused yet, just hang on, because it is confusing, and it's going to continue to be confusing. But we're talking now about his sole reign, which began 715 BC, so this is now 701 BC. This is also around the time that Hezekiah gets sick, which we'll read about after we read about the invasion, even though it technically probably happened either right before the invasion or at the very beginning of the invasion. But we're going to read about the invasion in its entirety first. Again, this is confusing. Okay, this chronology does get confusing at this point. Then in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent this message to the king of Assyria at Lachish. I have done wrong. So he broke off his arrangement with Assyria. And he apparently has been engaged in an alliance with other nations to fight against Assyria. Withdraw from me, and I will pay you whatever you demand of me. The king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the temple of the Lord, and the treasuries of the royal palace. At the time when we read about his, actually, you know what? We'll do it in order. When we read about his reception of the Babylonian envoys, we're going to read that he still has this stuff at that time. So this is happening after he's already entertained the Babylonian messengers. At this time, Hezekiah, king of Judah, stripped off the gold with which he had covered the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord, and gave it to the king of Assyria. Okay, that seems pretty straightforward so far, but the story's not over yet. I don't know exactly how to explain all of this. Okay, So again, like I said, the chronology is really fuzzy here. I mean, we're reading about events, sometimes in order and sometimes not. The Hezekiah apparently had withdrawn from the vassal arrangement with Assyria at some point, probably after Sargon II had died, which was in 705 BC. They probably didn't do it right away after becoming king. But he apparently had been continuing on with that vassal relationship that he inherited from his father, and probably ended that after Sargon's death in 705 BC, engaged in some sort of a alliances with other nations. Assyria had been fighting Babylon for a few years, and before they came back to this, Babylon is east of Assyria, so they deal with that problem first, and then a few years later come to the west to deal with the countries to the west, including Judah. Hezekiah apparently is trying to buy time by buying off Sennacherib, but I'm not entirely clear on this. So here we have here we go into the more specific account of their back and forth message exchange. Verse 17. The king of Assyria sent his supreme commander, his chief officer, and his field commander with a large army from Lachish, which is south of Jerusalem. It's on the way to Jerusalem, to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. They came up to Jerusalem and stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field. By the way, this is where Isaiah had met with King Ahaz earlier, when Ahaz was first considering making an alliance with Assyria. They called for the king, and Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to meet them. The field commander said to them, "Tell Hezekiah," this is the rabshakeh. Here they just translate as field commander, but in the other Bibles you'll read it written as a rabshakeh or whatever. It's a title. Tell Hezekiah, this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence? This is a boast of evil men right here, by the way. This is a great letter, or a great speech, honestly. I like reading this speech because it gives you an insight into how intelligent evil men operate. This guy is sharp. This field commander is a sharp cookie. He's boastful. He's speaking for the king of Assyria, who's very boastful. And they're speaking against God, but they're doing it in a very, very, very clever fashion, designed to demoralize Hezekiah and the people and turn them against each other. It doesn't work, thankfully, but it's very clever. It's a very clever, crafty speech. This is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours? You say you have strategy and military strength, but you speak only empty words. On whom are you depending that you rebel against me? Look, now you are depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff, which pierces a man's hand and wounds him if he leans on it. Basically saying that if you're trying to walk with the staff, you have to, of course, put your weight of your hand on your staff as you push it down. But your staff is too weak to carry your weight, so it breaks underneath you and splinters your hand. So he's comparing Pharaoh to a weak staff that can't actually hold anybody's weight. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who depend on him. Apparently, and again, we haven't read about it specifically here, apparently Hezekiah was having talks or making arrangements with Egypt at some point. Or at least, this guy thought he was. And if you say to me, we are depending on the Lord our God, Jehovah God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed? Saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar in Jerusalem. So he knows what they're doing here. He knows what sort of religious reforms Hezekiah is making. And he's saying, your God's not going to appreciate that. Now, that's his way of thinking. In his mind, and in the minds of everybody in the ancient world, the more high places that God had, the happier that God was, the more powerful that God was. This guy has an understanding of Hezekiah removing the high places, but he has no understanding that this God doesn't want all those high places. So to him, what Hezekiah has done would have turned Hezekiah's God against him. Come now, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses, if you can put riders on them. You don't even have enough guys to hold 2,000 horses. How can you repulse one officer of the least of my master's officials, even though you are depending on Egypt for chariots and horsemen? Furthermore, have I come to attack and destroy this place without word from the Lord? That's capital L-O-R-D, Lord here, by the way. The Lord himself told me to march against this country and destroy it. Now, maybe, there might, God does use enemy nations for his purposes. Okay, we read about this in the prophets, that he does assign these enemy nations the tasks of going up against his people. I don't know if maybe Sennacherib thought he was in that role or not. Maybe he did. His predecessors may have been. God did say he was going to send the Assyrians to take care of the northern kingdom and destroy them. And he did that. That's past tense by this point. That was over 20 years ago at this point in time. Later on, we're very clearly going to call Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylon agents of God who are doing God's work and destroying Judah. So Sennacherib may have this impression of himself as someone who's been told to do this by this people's own God because their God's unhappy with them. It's not out of the question that he legitimately thinks he's been told by Judah's God to do this because Judah's God is mad with Judah. He's still boasting, though. Even though he may have some twisted basis of belief for this, he's still boasting. Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah said to the rabshakeh, or the field commander, "Please speak to your servants in Aramaic, since we understand it. Don't speak to us in Judahite, in the hearing of the people on the wall." That would be, of course, their language, but they don't want the people on the wall to hear that because it'd be very demoralizing, which, of course, is exactly why the field commander is going to do it. But the commander replied, "Was it only to your master and you that my master has sent me to say these things, and not to the men sitting on the wall, who, like you, will have to eat their own filth and drink their own urine?" That's what happens when you're in a siege. You have no food or water, so you have to drink your own. You eventually get to the point where you have to drink your own poop and eat your own poop and drink your own pee. Or your kids. We read about that earlier in a previous siege 100 years ago in Israel, when they were talking about, we had two women who were disputing over eating their own sons because they were so hungry. Then the commander stood and called out in Hebrew. So he's not limiting this discussion just to the people in charge and using the official court language, which the regular people wouldn't understand. He's using he apparently can speak this language. He can speak Judahite. And who knows, he might even have been a Hebrew. He might even have been a captured Hebrew who's been promoted in the ranks. That does happen sometimes. Daniel, when he's taken to Babylon, he's made a eunuch and made into an official for Nebuchadnezzar and becomes one of the highest people in the whole entire country. So this guy could even be a Sumerian, who has experience with this culture. Maybe, entirely possible. It's been 20 years, The fall of Samaria happened 20 years ago, and parts of the kingdom were taken away even before that. So he could very well be someone who came from this area originally, or at least had familiarity with it. At any rate, he does speak their language, and seems pretty knowledgeable about their customs. So he's calling out to the people on the wall who can hear him in their own language. "Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says. Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you from my hand. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in the Lord when he says, 'The Lord will surely deliver us. The city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria.' Do not listen to Hezekiah. This is what the king of Assyria says. Make peace with me and come out to me. Then every one of you will eat from his own vine and fig tree and drink water from his own cistern. That sounds a lot like the prophetic language we've read in the prophetic books so far, doesn't it? Until I come, and he's putting himself in the role of God here. I'm going to be this way. I'm going to give you your things and your needs. Meet your needs. Until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey. I'm going to take you away from it. I'm going to deport you like he's already done to everybody else. And you're going to love it. It's going to be great. Choose life and not death. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for he is misleading you when he says, the Lord will deliver us. Has the God of any nation ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah? Have they rescued Samaria from my hand? Who of all the gods of these countries has been able to save his land from me? None, not a single one of them. How then can the Lord deliver Jerusalem from my hand? Your God is going to be just like all these other gods. None of these other gods I've ever challenged have ever beaten back my challenge. I've challenged every one of them, and I've beaten every one of them. I'm going to beat your God too. That's what he says here. But the people remained silent and said nothing in reply, because the king had commanded, do not answer him. Sometimes there is no response with words. Sometimes there's nothing you can actually say to the forces of evil to respond. Sometimes the only response is no response. Just don't engage them at all. Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph the recorder, went to Hezekiah with their clothes torn, and told him what the field commander had said.